In this video, I'm going to be reviewing What I Took Away from Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves. I am a mental health coach. I teach men to better understand invisible labor. This book has come up a handful of times in my research as I've been working on writing my own book proposal. So I wanted to share with you what I took away from it in a much shorter format rather than going through the multi-hour audiobook. I thought it was a good book. I would probably recommend it if you are someone that is consistently working with boys, trying to understand the problems that boys are going through. I think he did a great job presenting a ton of data to help us understand both sides of the issue. As myself being, I would call myself a feminist, and Richard does too as a researcher and a professor. I think that there are a lot of times where I have fallen into the potholes that he's described, that more progressive, more left-leaning, democratic type folks fall into. And I thought I really appreciated the solution. So we'll start off with, he outlines a handful of the challenges that a lot of boys are going through. We talk about a lot of problems that boys are going through. He presented some great data. I didn't know going into this that there are now more women going into universities than men are. I also had not realized that education wise, GPA wise, that a lot of men are falling behind compared to their female counterparts. A ton of, I grew up, I remember I was in the 8th grade when I saw the first, they started talking about STEM and or women in STEM. And we don't see the other side of that, which I'll get to in the solutions that he recommended. He talked a bit as well about how a lot of Black men are uniquely struggling with a lot of things comparatively to their Black women counterparts, similarly, because a lot of changes that are being made due to affirmative action. I think affirmative action has made a huge difference, and we definitely see where this has made a difference for women and a lot of folks of color. And apparently, due to the data, it is not making a huge difference for a lot of Black men that are trying to catch up in the labor force. So I did not realize going into this book what the challenges actually looked like for men. I kind of thought it was all smoke and mirrors. Like I wasn't really sure what it was. I didn't know that there was a ton of data to back it up. So I thought you did a really good job. This is a book written in 2022. Some other things, something I found a lot more empathy for myself in was him talking about men finding like heterosexual romantic partners. And he talked about how, I'm going to get part of this wrong, is that most of us, like as a society, as a culture, as a humanity, we actually have more women genes than we do male genes because so many more men are more likely to reproduce um, multiply. So like there might be a man that has babies from multiple women. The same does not happen and vice versa. So there ends up being a more diverse gender pool of women than of men. And along with that, he pointed out and he quoted a movie of how like a lot of women, when it comes to sex, when it comes to sexual relationships, like they often will want and or need a reason to want to feel physically intimate with a partner, versus a lot of men, and I would say I fall into this category, especially with my wife, is we need a place. And so part of that, which I had not really ever considered, was that is a huge part of that is due to evolution. The men that were not acting that way, that did not have that instinct or were not feeling that way, where like we're ready to go quickly, they were not continuing to procreate at much earlier in our humanity's evolution. So that gave me a lot more empathy as to like why I am the way that I am, where I can get aroused very quickly. I did not think that that was going to be one of my big individual takeaways, but a lot more empathy for myself and just understanding kind of how my brain works, and evolutionarily how that has impacted me. And when I have arousal at times or times that are inappropriate or just don't work for my wife, just knowing that that's part of my evolution as a human, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be physically intimate with her at that time. So that I thought that was really powerful for myself. Um, I also thought it was really valuable to hear how liberals are hurting men. I understand it, and I think I often am against a lot of the way the conservative side, hurts men. I had not considered quite how a lot of liberal men or a much more progressive side hurts men as well. So he points out, like, there was, I'm going to get I don't remember what it was, but there was a organization that was creating scores for universities, for systems to identify how close to equality they were getting. And so they're using data to identify, like, how close are these countries getting to equality. And he showed, like, a really clear statistic of when it gets closer and closer towards equality, that's good. At some point, when it hits 50-50, and then, women are overrepresented in the culture, they round back to 50%. So it's not a unilateral measurement of equality. It's actually just how much better women are doing. And so measurements like that are something that are hurting men, because the goal is no longer equality, it's just women's progress, which I think in a lot of ways, I personally appreciate that, having a daughter or seeing so much of my own male privilege play out in my life. But at the same point, he kind of points out how that is an issue, because we're now, if we're calling it equality, let's call it what it really is, because that's no longer equality when we're undercompensating for when the mark has been met. I'm hoping that this is making sense. But also talking about how a lot of the left side, a lot of the liberal side, they blame individual men for not doing things rather than looking at systemic challenges that men are overcoming. Especially like from an educational standpoint, and the speed of maturity that men go through. Talking again about male differences, and oftentimes boys are developing at a slower rate than women. And I think he'd said by age 25 is when they finally catch up, when their brain development is equal. So it kind of makes sense why so often older men are dating younger women, at least in those years, because the maturity level is much more likely to be similar. I know I always had a hard time relating with the girls in my grade, because they were often, I was also the second or third youngest in my grade. I didn't get redshirted, as I'll alluding to in a little bit. This one I thought was really obvious to me, is talking about how the right and or conservatives are hurting men. So oftentimes they're blaming men's struggles on feminism. And so it's a reactionary argument to it. And feminism is not the cause of men's problems, but it's an easy scapegoat that a lot of conservatives and the Andrew Tates of the world and a lot of politicians might be throwing around there. And that's what's become popularized on the internet in a lot of ways. So having that be reactionary to the women's movement is inappropriate, and it's not working. And so it's, I know he's talked about in multiple interviews is how a lot of the left is saying to be more like your sister to the guys, and then the right is saying to be more like your dad. I think probably a lot more guys should be more like our sisters, because so many of them are more emotionally intelligent by the same age. I don't agree with every single thing he says, especially like in interviews and things. I would love to have him on my podcast. I'm hoping I can, but I thought that was really interesting, hearing both sides of where that challenge occurs. And then I really liked his solutions. So first one he talked about is redshirting. For anyone that doesn't know what that means, it means that we are holding back our boys from going into education. So for example, in Massachusetts, where I live, when I was a child, I was born at the end of August. And so my parents had the option, one, of they could just put me in the grade. So when it came my age to go into preschool or kindergarten, they could choose to put me in school, or they could choose to wait a year till I was closer to that cutoff and then put me into school. So I would effectively be very close in more days old by holding me back. And what that does is that it changes the maturity level of the person going in comparatively to the average in their class. So he said that if we were to more encourage boys to be redshirted and not go into academics as early, they would be more likely to be at the same maturity level as a lot of their female counterparts. Now, he also talks about a lot of the issues that would also pop up, and that they would say, well, like, then shouldn't we just be redshirting girls too? And he talked about a couple pros and cons of that, but that it would in general be better. I think he talks about how a lot of this is where I get fuzzy and I struggle with, and it was a good book for me to read, is kind of hearing about the differences between boys and girls. Similar, this is one of the challenges that he talks about with the left, and I know that this is again one of my pitfalls, is that I want to think much more about nurture than I want to nature. And oftentimes I will push harder for nurture rather than identify and accept nature. And I know that hurts me in some ways, that I am still not great at articulating. But that was one of the first directions. The second one, and Liz Plank talks about this other one in her book, For the Love of Men, and I agree with this much more so than the red shirting, is more men in heels. So similar to how a lot of women were pushed into STEMs, science, technology, engineering, math. I was in engineering. And it's similar to have more women in male-dominated fields. Is he's saying, what if instead we were to put more marketing money, put more effort into getting more men into woman-dominated fields? The jobs are there, just a lot of men are not being pushed in or encouraged to be. So it's called the HEAL field. So similar to STEM, the acronym is HEAL for Health, Education, Administration, and Literacy. And I'm going to pull up real quick what some of those fields are. So I was also a teacher for a bit. So H for healthcare, so that's physicians, surgeons, specialists, nursing, registered nurses, nurse practitioners, therapy, physical therapists, occupational therapists, pharmacists, dentists, dental hygienists, veterinarians, vet technicians, education, teachers of all levels, especially he encouraged for English, and even looking at like elementary schools, I forget what the number he said, it was an insanely low number of men in like kindergarten or elementary roles. I was a math and science teacher in the middle and the high school fields, and there are a good amount of men in those fields, but when you get younger in age, there's so many less men. And then where'd it go? So then there's administration, so like healthcare administration, healthcare managers, hospital administrators, public health specialists, educational administration, principals, superintendents, curriculum specialists, and then literacy and the Google searches. Roles like support literacy, including librarians, educators, focus on literacy, those involved in language development. So I'm very pro that. I think we've always told girls we've always told girls like you can do anything a boy can do, but I remember hearing this first from Liz Plank, is we haven't told boys that they can do anything a woman can do. And so similarly, having men being encouraged into more of these HEAL fields, I think could be a great direction for a lot of men, filling a lot of needs that the market has. We saw after COVID how devastated the healthcare industry got. And so this is a great opportunity for them to fill spaces, and we need to redefine like what masculinity looks like and or what it doesn't look like if we're going to encourage men to be in those fields. And then the next one was symmetrical parental leave. And I thought this was really interesting. I had not fully considered, but rather than having parental leave for a family and being able to say, okay, you have, let's say, a year, and you can use, both of you can use some of it. He can have 6 months, she can have 6 months, or she can use 9 months and he can use 3 months. Instead, saying it's symmetrical, and if you lose it, if you don't use it, then you lose it. That would force so many more men to take on parental leave. I am super, super, super pro parental leave. I got to have 4 months. Well, I had 3 months of paternity leave, and then I got appendicitis on the very last day, and then had emergency surgery, and then got to stay home for another month, which ended up just being perfect timing. Someone was calling me. So that was really valuable for me to go through that. And so he encourages symmetrical paternity leave, will also force so many more men to take paternity leave, but will also improve how I think there's a lot of women that by having children are going to suffer in their careers. And so we're not seeing that same thing happen for men. And so I think having more equality around that, we're going to see more playing fields evened. So overall, I thought it was a good book to listen. Again, I know that I still need to work on my understanding and appreciation and articulation of nature differences. I am very much often of the mindset that everything is nurture, because I think I'm, who knows, maybe toxically in a growth mindset space, and that I really believe we can do anything. And I know that I've had a lot of shame myself about the parts of me that are a man and that are part of my nature. So I think I've seen so much negative come from people leaning way too hard into nature. And so that's been kind of tough. That was a tough consideration for me reading this book. I think it was around chapters 4, 5, 6. He talked about that. So if this is valuable, share it with somebody and or bring it up a conversation with someone else. I'm sure there's other reviews on this one. I know that he's done a lot of talks, and if you search Richard Reeves, you'll find more. But if you want to have conversations about this, this will be posted in my Mental Load Basics community. So people can chat about it in there. If you're looking for a little bit more than a comment section, the link will be down low. And for anyone that is interested in working with me for better understanding mental load, you can book a free consult call, again, in the links below. Or if you're just looking for a free PDF, you can get that, my Mental Load 101 PDF, 300 plus of my videos squished into one PDF file. Hope this is valuable. If you haven't already subscribed, I highly encourage it. You'll be getting more book reviews, especially as I'm working on books and trying to find more readers that are looking for this kind of content. A couple other things I've done are Fair Play, Unicorn Space. I'll probably be doing this one over my shoulder. Power Pause, probably doing this one over my shoulder. A Better Share, Emotional Labor. There's a handful of books that I got that I'm planning on doing reviews for. So hope this is valuable. See you next time.